Now from a refugee camp in central Gaza is Sam Rose, the acting director of the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine refugees. Sam, thank you for joining us. Just walk us through what you heard last night.
Thanks, Becky. Thanks for having me on. Look, all this started at just after 2 a.m. In the middle of the night. I was woken up, and I have to assume that the entire Gaza Strip was woken up by a series of intense bombardments, planes flying over. Reported about 100 planes were involved in these bombardments that stretched from the north of Gaza right down to the south. Those intense bombardments continued for an hour or so. Things are a bit quieter now, and I say that with a number of qualifications. We're still hearing the drones overhead, the planes overhead, the bombs and explosions every 20 minutes or so, noise of helicopters, etc. But as is often the case, things a bit calmer during the day. Of course, that comes too late for those. Over 400 already being reported killed, and many, many more who have been injured. And what we also see in these instances is hundreds and hundreds of people on the move again. People whose homes have been bombed or are in fear of their homes being bombed, and tens of thousands living in areas that have again been declared evacuation zones. So potentially tens of thousands of people on the move if this continues.
And can you just explain the psychological impact on Gazans who have had some temporary relief, of course, for a couple of months since this fragile ceasefire went into place?
Yeah, it's devastating. It's devastating for all of us here, but it's devastating particularly for Palestinians, particularly for children. These are children and their parents that have known nothing but fear, grief, and suffering over the past 15 months. Children going to bed every night, not knowing if they're going to wake up in the morning. We had a respite for 8 weeks, where people were able to breathe out, walk the streets, start rebuilding their lives, rebuilding their kind of shattered minds and bodies. Tens of thousands of children back to school, but all that has been shattered again, and people already down on their knees after 15 months of this, many of them on the verge of starvation and famine. Their immune systems, their mental health already shot to pieces. We shudder to think about what this means for their immediate well-being, but also for their longer term well-being. But of course, it isn't too late to stop this slide into war. We can pull back from the brink as we have done before. We continue to call for the ceasefire to be respected, to be restored, for the hostages to be released, and for aid to continue.
Sam, calls for reinstating the ceasefire are already coming thick and fast from the aid sector. Your boss, Philippe Lazzarini, saying, and I quote, "A return to the ceasefire is a must." Also, the UN Deputy Special Coordinator for Middle East Peace Process, Mohammed Hadi, in a lengthy statement, calling what we've seen today unconscionable. But we seem very far from a renewed ceasefire. Israel says it wants, effectively, Hamas to release hostages and a deal on its terms at this point. What can we, or you, realistically expect to happen next?
I mean, we don't know what's going to happen next. All we can do is call on the parties to the conflict to live up to their responsibilities and put the people first. The hostages who are being held here, the prisoners in Israeli jails, and the millions of Palestinians here who've known nothing but suffering and grief for the past 15 months. That's what needs to happen. I can only speak here on behalf of the humanitarian community, on behalf of those workers and those communities that have already suffered and already lost too much.
Israel, as we understand it now, consulted with the Trump administration, the White House press secretary saying, quote, "all hell will break loose." And those are familiar words coming from the Trump administration with regard Gaza. Israel conducting the strikes we saw last night. What is your message to the US administration that is currently backing Israel's moves here?
I mean, our message has been clear. It's been clear from the start. We need to put the people first. We need to put the civilians first. They've gone through too much. This is about their futures today, but also the future of their communities for years and years to come. This can be stopped. We can still draw back from the brink. People have gone through unimaginable tragedy here. Palestinians inside Gaza, the hostages inside Gaza, these people who can do absolutely nothing about the situation that they find themselves in. There are rules for wars, and if, first of all, we call for the ceasefire to be reinstated, if that doesn't happen, we call for the uninterrupted flow of humanitarian aid. We call for the protection of humanitarian workers, and all these things that we've continued to call for. We cannot slide back into what we've gone through over the past 16 months, where hell has already sadly broken loose several times.
Yeah, and that aid, of course, frozen since March the 2nd. We started this hour, Sam, thank you, with some sound from a woman who has clearly lost family in these latest